I hate to see it because I think that they both gave credibility to each other. But at the same time, there's a part of me that kind of tips my cap to Elon Musk because he's right.
The bromance is over. Elon says the bill's debt slavery and wants Republicans to kill the bill. Trump says Elon should have said something earlier.
Zach Abraham, trouble in paradise. I hate it.
It's a lover's quarrel. It's a lover's quarrel.
Disagreement is fine, right? It's healthy. I don't need everyone to agree all the time. Maybe this will be productive. It just feels like mommy and daddy fighting a little bit.
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you, I'm a little bit surprised regarding the subject matter, right? That kicked off this lover's quarrel. And I, in one way, surprised in a good way, and surprised in a bad, in another way, surprised in a bad way. But I do think it is a refreshing thing. And of course, it's not going to get spun like this and discussed like this, but I find it refreshing to hear people that are pushing the same way politically free to disagree in daylight, because politics has become so tribal, right? Especially on the left. If you step out of line 1 inch, you're getting smacked, right? And so, I mean, quite honestly, if we're going to fix some of the problems in this country, I think we need to get used to this discourse. But I also think, in a way, it illuminates Elon Musk's naivete. Is it related to government budgeting? And I don't mean that as a slam. I also think, in some ways, the discussions regarding DOGE, especially looking back on it now after seeing the big, beautiful bill, I feel virtually certain that many in the Trump administration anticipated a much easier time cutting things. Right.
Sure.
And reducing budgets. I mean, if you think about how recently we were discussing about balancing the budget, and then within 90 days, that goes to a $2.5 trillion deficit. It's kind of a dramatic turnaround, right? And he's going to take a lot. He's going to take it on the chin over this. But do
Trump
you remember?
or Elon is going to take it on the chin?
Well, they're both going to take it on the chin for this. Elon's going to get away. Elon's going to have it easier because what he's saying is disagreeing with Trump. So naturally, more people are going to be, receptive to his message. But do you remember we were having a discussion about when DOGE started and we started doing this show. And remember the part of it where I said, I really think that they should work on messaging. I think that they should explain to people how long this is going to take. And that's what I meant, because when you start looking at it, I guarantee you this is what I guarantee you this is what happened. When you talk about balancing a budget, right, that's going to be in excess of $7 trillion, $2.5 trillion of that is deficit. That means that you're willing to shrink, right, the government spending by the equivalent of almost 4%, right? To get back to a balanced budget, everything include you need to, especially after this year, our calculation, you need to lower the deficit by about, you got to cut it in half. No, excuse me. To get back to a balanced budget, you'd have to cut it completely, right?
Yep.
So you'd be talking about a reduction in government spending of $2.5 trillion, right? You do the math on that. That's an 8% hit to GDP. When you look at the great financial crisis from top to bottom in 0809, that was a 3.8% drop in GDP. That's why I was saying message this better. What the goal should be is to cap spending, hold the deficit where it is in nominal terms, meaning set that sucker at 2, 2.5, 2.3, something like that, and just we're not going above it, right? And then grow out of it over time. You've got to address entitlements. There is not enough. There is a lot of wasteful, fraudulent spending in government, but there is not enough to balance the budget, right? 85%, I believe, of government spending is Social Security, Medicare, defense, and interest on the debt. None of those are going anywhere.
Yep.
Right? And so you've got to address it, and you've got to do it longer term, because the reality is, Brandi, we've gotten to a place in society that I think it's virtually impossible for a sitting president to get reelected if the market drops 20 to 30% on his watch.
Yeah.
Right? People will just say that is bad economic policy. because nobody wants to have to pay any prices anymore, right? We want to balance the budget, but we don't want our 401ks taking a 20% hit, right? And I look, I get the sympathy, and I'm not mocking people, but what I am saying is there are far more important things. Focusing just on markets and Wall Street for the last 40 years is part of how we got in this problem, right? So anyway, I hate to see it, because I think that they both gave credibility to each other. But at the same time, there's a part of me that kind of tips my cap to Elon Musk, because he's right. What he's saying is correct. I also like the fact that Trump hasn't gone after him in a personal way and eviscerated him as of yet.
Yeah. No nickname yet. And actually put a pin in that, because let's catch people up if they're just figuring out the drama. So it started with Elon Musk, as we talked on the show last week. He, leaves DOGE at his scheduled time, and then he comes out and he says, "I'm sorry, but I just can't stand it anymore. This massive, outrageous, pork-filled congressional spending bill is a disgusting abomination. Shame on those who voted for it. You know you did wrong. You know it." And he has since, sent out a lot of tweets about it, et cetera. And I agree with you on sort of, we should have all set expectations in a place, and even for Elon, set expectations in a place where maybe he wasn't so disappointed when he left DOGE. Now, on Trump, so Trump has been asked about this. It was like he gave like an 8-minute response. I'm not going to play it all. Hasn't given Elon a bad nickname yet, but he seems, and this is so sad, because Trump, he's a tough guy. He actually seems like personally hurt. Like he finally made a friend, and now he's not sure if they're friends anymore. So here's a clip of President Trump responding to Elon's criticisms.
Look, Elon and I had a great relationship. I don't know if we're well anymore. I was surprised because you were here. Everybody in this room practically was here as we had a wonderful send-off. He said wonderful things about me. You couldn't have nicer. Said the best things. He's worn the hat. Trump was right about everything. And I am right about the great, big, beautiful bill. We call it a great, big, beautiful bill because that's what it is. But I'm very disappointed because Elon knew the inner workings of this bill better than almost anybody sitting here, better than you people. He knew everything about it. He had no problem with it. All of a sudden he had a problem. And he only developed the problem when he found out that we're going to have to cut the EV mandate, because that's billions and billions of dollars. And it really is unfair. We want to have cars of all types. Electric, we want to have electric, but we want to have a gasoline, combustion. We want to have different. We want to have hybrids. We want to have all. We want to be able to sell everything. And when that was cut, and Congress wanted to cut it, he became a little bit different, and I can understand that. But he knew every aspect of this bill. He knew it better than almost anybody, and he never had a problem until right after he left. And if you saw the statements he made about me, which I'm sure you can get very easily, it's very fresh on tape. He said the most beautiful things about me. And he hasn't said bad about me personally, but I'm sure that'll be next.
Oh, doesn't he seem hurt? Isn't that an atypical reaction for the president?
Yeah, I mean, I just wish he didn't say anything about it and just say, we thank Elon for his service and all the good stuff he's done. But I mean, I understand where he's coming from. I also think it's really funny, the irony of all this, because, how many people were saying that the only reason Elon Musk is cooperating is because he wants government handouts and, stuff, all that kind of stuff. But
do you think there's merit to that, Zach? The President Trump saying that this is why Elon's mad?
I mean, I do think there's merit to it. I mean, I imagine that he thought, it's kind of the not in my backyard deal, right? Like everybody wants to cut costs until it hits their own pocket. I'm sure there's something to that. I imagine it didn't make him extraordinarily happy. It doesn't make his life easier, certainly. But I don't know. I get the feeling that, I get the feeling that I don't know why he would attack it from the angle that he did if that's all he was irritated about. I honestly think Elon sounds like a guy who is really internalized and understands where we're at in terms of a debt picture and a deficit. And I'll be honest with you right now. I mean, there's a lot of people out there that can recite the numbers. I haven't heard very many people that understand where we're at in terms of the choices that lie ahead of us, and not lie ahead of us in forms of the next decade. I mean, like in the form of the next year, next 2 years, meaning we have backed ourselves into a corner where for the first time in all of our lifetimes, the Federal Reserve does not have many of their tools at their disposal because of the position we're in. And the fact that we are at where we're at and there isn't more alarm or understanding of the issue and what needs to be done, it has to be overwhelmingly frustrating to him, because I know that when I realized, right, and I've known this for years, obviously doing what I do for a living, but when you understand the terminal nature of the situation we're dealing with, it really is infuriating to watch people, seemingly dance and party while, Rome is burning.
Yeah.
And the problem with currency crises and what we're up against is you don't get warnings, right? When you are over the ledge, it's like the same is true to be over leveraged as a consumer, right? As long as you're getting that COLA every year and there's no recession and you don't lose your job, you're going to be able to keep the balls in the air. But eventually something is going to happen unforeseen, okay? And then you're staring at a lot of hard choices, right? What do we sell? What do we foreclose on? And you're just over leveraged. So you've put yourself in a compromised situation, and it's only a matter of time until that wave comes. And that's the problem, is that we have a government that thinks they can look out and plan 10 and 20 years. You can't. And we've thought like that. I mean, let's go back and look at CBO estimates going back 30 years.
Yeah.
Which one of them said we'd be here as far as debt goes, right? How many times have we heard over the course of the last 30 years that these politicians are like, oh, this bill will trim this much from the deficit? Has it ever happened?
Yeah. No. And to your point, Elon's right. Okay, I think just inarguably, Elon is right in his analysis of what's happening. I think, he probably got in there for the first time. He's really seeing the inner workings of government, the first time he's been in a position like that. So probably a little gobsmacked. I think it's building frustration because, of course, there was already frustration over Congress not enacting some of the recommended cuts from DOGE. So he probably felt like he was spinning his wheels. And then he gets out and then there's this massive bill. And he's like, well, what did we even do it for? So I think it was probably compounded frustration. One of the things that's been really interesting to watch is what side Republican members of Congress are falling on in this little family feud that we're in. Because up until this point, like going against Trump at all is like, absolutely do not do it. Like that is the death knell for any Republicans in Congress. Even the few that had spoken out against it, like Massey, for instance, were like, the president's like, you shouldn't get reelected. But there are a lot of Republicans now who are taking publicly the side of Elon Musk in this. And I know they sent back a $9 billion rescissions package with recommended DOGE cuts after Elon came out and said this. Here's what I love. John Kennedy, Senator John Kennedy is just hilarious. So anytime I could play a clip from him. And here's whose side he took in this little tiff.
If we reduce spending, as Mr. Musk is trying to do, then that will reduce fiscal stimulus and it will lower prices. That's just basic economics. And I'm a big Musk supporter. I think he's doing an extraordinary job. He deserves a personal pan pizza or a nice hat or a cold beverage or something. I don't think he needs money, but I'm all for what he's doing. Is it a little messy? Yes. But, remodeling is messy. But I think he is absolutely correct.
Here's what's interesting to watch is you have these two larger than life, very consequential figures, right? Donald Trump and Elon Musk. I think having Elon Musk be who he is has given Republicans a little bit of leeway to, for once, maybe disagree with the president.
Well, yeah, and especially when, we all know what the real percentage of Republicans that truly care about fiscal discipline. It's not a lot.
10.
Right? Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
But 95% are going to pay lip service to it. Mm-hmm. Right? It's one of the 10 commandments on the conservative side. But so when somebody comes out there sounding that alarm, you're going to get sympathy, support just because they've got to do it. Right, from a certain amount of them. And this is where and this to me is where there's just been a failure of messaging, because again, I really wish that it would have, if you need to do this, like for instance, let's say here's the long-term strategy. Let's say Trump's like, look, we got to clean up several of the messes that Biden left behind. In order to adequately do that over the next 12 months, we're going to need a little extra spending. Okay. The other thing is I want to juice this thing. And here's another thing that I really want people to understand. I am a big believer in free markets. I do not think governments drive economy, but as government spending becomes a larger and larger percentage of any economy, that economy by definition becomes more and more sensitive to government spending. Okay. So if you cut the deficit to zero, like Trump was saying a little bit, 90 days ago, eventually the private industry, private market will come in, fill in that gap. It will be a more productive slice of the economy. It will improve, but that takes years. Okay. And the problem is election cycles don't take that long.
Yeah.
And that's the reality of it. You got to face it, right? Because if Trump and the Republicans that were elected last time, if they're one and done, then none of this stuff really matters. They can just executive order it away tomorrow, right? Or as soon as they get elected. So that's why I wish the messaging would have been different. If that was the long-term strategy, and then saying, look, we are going to get serious about this. As soon as we clean up these messes, we are going to push the deficit down. We're going to do these things. We're going to address these things, and we're going to take this out over a longer period of time. I think that that's an easier thing. And I think it's a fairly easy thing to sell too. I think you sit there and go, guys, we've known we've been overspending for 40 years. And, and so like I said, to your original question, of course, they're going to come out and say they support Elon, and they think we're spending too much. But if they're being sincere in their support of Elon, my question would be, why did you vote for the bill? And second of all, if what I am saying is right, and this is part of a strategy, and they acknowledge they got to, then say that.
Yep.
Right? Come out and say it. It's one or the other, right? Be the polar opposite. You got elected because you were the polar opposite of what people had been used to dealing with, and they were tired of it. So continue to be that polar opposite. Come out and tell the American people, look, we all have too much debt. We know this. Here's the strategy to deal with it.
Yeah. And meanwhile, the work of DOGE continues without Elon Musk and behind the scenes while this is happening. Let's get to our DOGE miss of the week. So this, I think, is a miss on paper, but I think it's a bigger win. Because when I'm thinking about, what is the best role for DOGE, right? Is it to go in there and say, cut this, or is it to streamline government in ways that will be, fiscally responsible, and also to act as a review before money is misappropriated, to be sort of this buffer before that money even goes out the door, so we don't have to claw it back. And I almost think maybe that's a better use for it. But, that means that they have to review some things that I might kind of like. This from the Washington Post. Plans for nation's largest ICE detention center halted amid DOGE review. So a planned $47 million contract would have expanded a Southeast Georgia facility to house immigrants arrested in the region. And apparently this is because the what they're calling the U.S. DOGE service, which is that what it's called? I thought it was the Department of Government Efficiency, but the Washington Post is referring to it as the U.S. DOGE service, has basically instituted a protocol where they are going to, so it says, the sizable contract was flagged for review under a federal policy that requires all Department of Homeland Security contracts worth more than $20 million to be reviewed by DOGE. So, that seems like a low threshold, but basically because it meets that threshold, this plans to expand an ICE detention facility, which inarguably we need. We know a lot of these facilities are overrun. They're having to send people to Gitmo, essentially.
Right.
Now it's halted. So is that a good thing or a bad thing? Do you have to kind of just, if you're going to set that threshold, I guess you have to do it.
Yeah, I think you got to review everything. And, obviously there are operationally necessary things that DOGE is going to take a look at and maybe even suggest cutting. that are going to have to be overrid. Like no matter who's running DOGE, 100% of the recommendations are not going to be good ideas. Right. But the role I see for DOGE, and this is my dream world scenario, but I think it's incredibly appropriate. The U.S. government is the largest financial institution on the face of the earth and in the history of humankind, right? The fact that you don't have an internal auditor of sorts,
right?
And people are like, oh, the CBO, and I'm like, look, you're as effective as your progressions or your projections, man. And if you think the CBO has any credibility whatsoever, I got a bridge to sell you.
Yep.
And that's not my opinion, right? I mean, we can just go pull back every single CBO projection, and I mean, those guys couldn't hit water if they fell out of a boat.
Yeah, nobody listens to them anyway. The media talks about CBO, but the lawmakers don't care.
No, I can tell you that Wall Street and investors certainly don't listen to them. So, but yeah, when you've got an issue like that, again, I'll bring it back to the personal financial realm, right? When you have a debt problem and a spending problem in your household, what is on the table to examine? Everything.
Yeah. And
you've got to do it, right? You got to do that for several reasons, for impartiality but also just to make sure that nothing's slipping through the cracks. So I love the idea of them staying on permanently in the form of an internal auditor. And I think it's absolutely absurd that we don't have somebody currently doing that job before DOGE.
Well, and I think what's interesting about this specific example is it shows in a way the apolitical nature of what DOGE is doing, because my gut tells me that this sort of threshold for Department of Homeland Security contracts was instituted because they were worried about some of the money that was being funneled to these nonprofits that were essentially helping people avoid, deportation and helping, actually thwart the work that DHS is doing. So they're probably like, let's review these contracts. But then that threshold also applies to something Republicans like, which is expanding detention, something Tom Home and the Border Czar has called for. So actually, this is something the left hates, these privately run, this one's run by Geo Group. They hate these privately run federal ICE detention facilities. So they should be cheering this on, like, yeah, review that spending. And Republicans are probably like, well, we shot ourselves in the foot on that, because they really did halt it. I mean, the county where this is going in was supposed to take a vote on it this week. So they stopped the vote while the DOGE review happens. There's like 400 jobs that are sort of in limbo over it. But I mean, if it's going to be apolitical, which spending oversight should be, then yeah, DOGE is going to have to review some things that Republicans would have otherwise wanted fast-tracked.
Yeah, well, the other thing that we have to realize too is it's not just the bills that we hate on the surface of it, right? Expansions of entitlement programs in a lot of cases and things like that. Those aren't the only kind of bills that can have onerous amounts of pork in them.
Yeah.
Right. Let's think back to this was way worse than pork, but let's think back to the Patriot Act, right? Keeping America safe, right? Just meaning even bills that we're going to like on the face of it. And that's what an internal auditor's for, right? Having somebody doing that job, because as you and I have stated before many times, I often feel threatened by both sides of the political aisle.
Yeah.
And we both know that both sides of the political aisle need to be watched like hawks. And so, yeah, look, if we're going to empower them to make these decisions and go over it, I'm with you. I know, to me, it is absolutely 100% factual that we need more detention centers. I don't think anybody that's got their feet on the ground would argue that. At the same time, I love the fact that they're looking at that too, because Democrats aren't the only ones that can cheat.
Yeah, and hopefully it can be a temp situation, because once we deal with the crisis that we have and we start deporting people, close down the border, if we can keep it that way, then maybe you can end up closing some detention centers over time. But all right, Zach, before I ask if you're still bullish on DOGE, I've been trying to ponder what Elon's nickname will be if Trump gives him one. I think probably he likes alliteration, so entitled Elon. Entitled Elon. I like, Ron DeSanctimonious is one of the most brilliant nicknames, because it just really rolls off the tongue. But yeah, we'll have to see. Nicole, do you have an idea?
It'll probably be something like E-loser.
E-loser. Yes. It'll be something like that. I hope it doesn't get to that point. I don't want mommy and daddy to keep fighting. We need everyone working together to make America better. All right, still bullish on DOGE?
Yeah, 100%. Absolutely.
Okay.
I hope it's full time.
All right, Zach, thank you so much.
All right, thanks for having me.